Okay, I'd like to call the
Five, right,
Planning
five.
and Zoning Committee meeting to order. And it is 5:30, and in attendance, myself, Council Member Allison Love, and Council Member Bud Watty. So the first item on the agenda is discussion regarding self-storage facility location. Jonathan.
All right, good evening, committee members. So this issue was referred to the committee by, I believe, Mr. Huckabee. We've had a lot of discussions about self-storage over the years, most recently in the Lake Wiley overlay. That's part of the overlay standards there, what was previously. So I think the intent was to try to control better to some degree where self-storage facilities can go, because I think the thought is they're gobbling a lot of the good real estate when it comes to commercial property. It's crowding out opportunities to go shopping, to do your groceries, for personal services, things like that. And they're just kind of these big buildings full of stuff, but not full of people. Not really a destination location. They're gobbling up a lot of the commercial zoning space out there. So these are the zoning districts in which self-storage facilities are currently allowed. So that C stands for conditional use. So that means it's allowed in that district as long as they adhere to certain conditions. And so the conditions we have in the code relate to paving, different design standards, whether you've got an exterior unit or an interior unit. If you came here tonight via 5, you would have seen the brand new life storage facility. That's an internal one. So they met the design standards for the interior. There are standards in there for a caretaker dwelling, someone who might be living on site to take care of the property for security purposes, and it prohibits dangerous materials from being stored in these facilities. So those are the conditions that are associated with self-storage. Now, I think when this was referred to committee, the thought was, well, maybe to keep them from crowding out those other commercial uses, that you set them back further from the road, have them separated, something to that effect. But really, when staff took a deeper look at what these other jurisdictions are doing, the better answer might be to eliminate the use altogether from some of the zoning districts. If the pain point is the conflict with other commercial uses, then if you eliminate that as a potential use in a commercial district, then that pain point goes away completely. Never mind where it might be set back from a major road, things like that. So you're going to see this table repeatedly, both tonight and going forward. Just so we're speaking apples to apples, we created 16 jurisdictions that are a comparison class. So we took 8 jurisdictions that are large counties in South Carolina, and then the other 8 are the local jurisdictions. So we have like being the large South Carolina counties, and the local being the local jurisdictions. So you get an apples to apples comparison for any zoning or land development change that you might be contemplating. Not that you necessarily have to land on exactly what other jurisdictions are doing, but that gives you some information about where your county falls along how other jurisdictions are regulating these topics. So what staff recommends you might consider doing is to just eliminate self-storage as a use, as a conditional use from the commercial districts, both being rural commercial, it's not allowed in neighborhood commercial as it is, and from general commercial, and also UD, because you end up with a lot of commercial properties in there as well, and leave it more of a light industrial use. And that is, I know the facade on a lot of these places, they do a fairly good job these days of making those indoor facilities in particular look like retail spaces, but no one's going there to check it out. No one's going there shopping. They're just going to drop their stuff off or pick their stuff up. So they really do operate more like a light industrial use, truly. So that's our recommendation. Happy to take any questions you might have.
What is the P and the C?
So the P, yeah, that's a good question. So the P means permitted, so that would mean that there's no conditions associated with it in that particular
Okay.
jurisdiction. C would be the conditional. SE would mean that it would require a special exception. So if you're not comfortable entirely eliminating self-storage facilities as a use in those commercial zoning districts, the next step down would be to allow them but require a special exception. So that they would have to bring forward an application to the Board of Zoning Appeals and justify to the board that the use meshes with the surrounding development.
So I have a question. If, let's say that we don't allow them in those, in that zoning code, and then they're non-conforming where they are. So what does that mean? In other words, I wouldn't want one to be used to be able to say, well, there's already one here, so we could, in other words, it's set a precedent. So the fact that they're non-conforming, is that what?
Yeah, the
is that what we stop?
nonconformity, and that's with any zoning code change or the adoption of zoning when you didn't have it before, that's how you end up with nonconformities. And so, you know, say you eliminated self-storage from GC, and you had a property today that's zoned GC, and they got a self-storage facility on there already. They're good, they're grandfathered, that's what the legal nonconformity does for them. But if you had a property next door that was vacant in GC, and you eliminated from the district, they wouldn't be able to put a self-storage in there, even though their neighbor has one, because council's made that change.
So where does that mean they are allowed? So they're not allowed, really, they're not in residential,
No.
so they're allowed.
So the districts that they are currently allowed in would be the rural commercial, which we don't have a lot of. It's a new district. I think we might have one or two of those out there. But GC, general commercial, RI is rural industrial. I think we might have one of those in the county as well. That's a new district as well. And light industrial is the LI, UD is the urban development.
So you're saying that's what you said about GC?
So they're allowed in, so all of those letter Cs, that means they're allowed in that district.
Now,
Currently.
Yeah.
As long as they meet those conditions.
Yeah. Okay. So you can tell from the, I think because they're everywhere to begin with, you can tell. But you can tell from some of the zoning in the other areas that they're ahead of us on limiting.
Yeah, some of them are a little more permissive, some of them are restrictive, and TK doesn't allow them at all.
Right.
So it runs the gamut. It's really just the preference of that particular jurisdiction.
And how do you feel about like the boat and RV storage places that are coming in that's a kind of a.
Honestly, they're very similar. They're just large storage of large objects. But
Should they be treated the same as this?
You could justify that certainly.
Coming run to in your area, if you're close to the water, those type places, boat and RVs, that's a typical close by, close proximity. I wouldn't picture someone putting a boat and RV storage ground right out here off of Collins Highway, because they're so far from the water. If I was gonna store my boat or something, I wanna be close to it. I don't have to drag it all the way halfway across the
You
county.
do get the RV storage everywhere.
Yeah.
And you might have a couple of boats land in there, and you'd be surprised how far away people will do the boat storage.
I've got.
No, but if you live in Lake Wiley, in that area, you want something close by, you're not gonna bring one way to Rock Hill.
Yeah, that would be your preference.
But see, they have marinas for that. They're usually in the marinas for that. They're not taking their boats in and out normally like that. They're in their yard or they're at the marina. So
I have one in the middle of Regent Park,
a boat and RV place.
in the middle.
The neighborhood.
And then we have on the outside, on 21, we have 3. Boom, 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 RV and boat.
So what areas are we really looking to not pick on, but try to control or limit across the county, not by zoning, but just, is it your area, Fort Mill, because it's certainly not
So
my
I get,
area.
so
That's
you're
right.
It's
saying
those more commercial areas.
not to do those 3 areas, is that what you're saying?
Right.
It's
To remove
it's
them
those
as a
areas that are
condition.
commercialized, that are already commercialized, where y'all don't have a lot of that. And so it's not impacted, like Highway 5 has got it. You've got,
Well, I didn't have a problem with the one going up on 5.
that big one on the corner.
yeah.
At the Avenue Church.
But regardless of whenever you're trying to put, whether it's a Dollar General, storage place, bicycle shop, whatever, there's gonna be some pushback, I don't care what you build. Somebody's gonna show up, somebody's gonna have a grudge, somebody's gonna have a thorn in the side about it.
Okay.
I wish sometimes we could, I don't wanna make them all, when would we have to go to like a special exception to allow one? Is that when it's not approved for that particular?
So you would do one or the other. So,
Okay.
and even if you remove them from the districts that we're suggesting, they still would have the option to come to council and
Right.
request to rezone to one of the districts that would allow it. It just they would lose the opportunity to develop primarily GC and UD without having to come to either council or board.
They lose to by right.
And they would retain the by right for the light industrial.
Right.
And they would have to rezone largely for RI just because that district isn't really out there quite yet.
Okay.
What is that? What is that district? What is that for?
It's mostly so you can have some lower impact industrial in rural settings, as we have had a lot of parcels out in rural areas of the county over the years that have been developed with some sort of light industrial property, but they're not truly light industrial and they don't really match the comp plan to be rezoned to light industrial. So it's kind of a better district to be able to do that.
So are we looking for staff to bring us this recommendation about eliminating those three?
Yeah.
Well, just as an example, let's say Horry County. It's permitted in commercial and industrial, which is several in that category.
Mhm.
So compare ours to that. If we went to that, what would we eliminate up there?
So if you're talking about Oregon and Lexington, they're more permissive. So rather than having C for conditional in these, do I have a laser pointer? So see, these got conditions. So it's not just by right. They can't just set up shop with that use and be good to go. They got to meet these conditions in order to do that in our code today. For these jurisdictions that say P in commercial and industrial, that just means permitted. So these would all be Ps, and they wouldn't have any conditions. They could just set up shop. They
So
could
you're
look
saying
however they wanted.
you're saying eliminate a few of the areas, but they still have to meet conditions in the other areas.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree with
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Just based on what's happening in my area, I agree with that.
What do you think?
So typically, y'all in the past have taken a vote on these things. That way we have
One
certainty.
recommendation.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion, let me, if I can see that without my glasses on. I'll make a motion that we eliminate the self-storage facilities in RC, GC, and UD. And they would also still have to meet the conditional uses in the other zoning code.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Good.
Oh, okay, I was just trying to figure out how I was gonna say that. And I have to report on that. Okay.
You can catch up on all that.
So, the second item is, that we need to discuss is 2 principal dwellings on AGC lots.
Yes. So I believe this was referred by Tommy. And so here's the code provision that we're talking about tonight. It's relatively short, so I'll just read it for you. In the AGC district, up to 2 principal dwellings are allowed on one lot if each dwelling is sited so that all applicable lot size, lot width, and setback requirements are met as if the dwellings were established on individual lots. This is intended to ensure both dwellings meet applicable zoning code requirements in the event the lot on which the dwellings are located is subsequently subdivided. So essentially what that means is you want to be able to site your buildings so that you can by right subdivide and not have to get a rezone. So that's essentially what that's saying to you. So you would need a minimum of 10 acres in order to have 2 principal dwellings on your lot, and then you could have the 2. So that way, if you wanted to subdivide, you've already got the 5 acres and they're already located, you can do it by right.
You said something just now that I haven't heard the whole time this has kind of been in question, 10 acres. Because some of, when we're talking AGC, some AGC is 5 acres. And there's no way you can about see allowing 2 homes on 5 acres and still be AGC, because like we're trying to protect here, at some juncture, if it ever had to be split, now you basically done went down to RUD because it won't have the 5 acres.
Right. Yeah, and I'll go through this example that I think it illustrates exactly that point. So I picked a spot in the county where you've got, across the street, we've got 5 acres here, we've got 12 acres here. So this is that zoomed in a little bit more, and say, you've got an existing house on each one, right? So one house on 5 acres, one house on 12 acres. Now, if you build a second principal home, so not an ADU, that's a separate thing. So we're talking about a second principal home, same size. You might put it in these locations. Now I've got 2 homes on 5 acres, I've got 2 homes on 12 acres. Now, the scenario in which you might do this is almost exclusive to family, right? You're not gonna live on the same lot as somebody you're not related to in a house that you own or they own. That's not gonna be a typical situation. But as we all know, nobody lives forever. So eventually, those homes are gonna need to be sold. So when you go to sell it, there are not a lot of people out in the market looking to buy 2 homes on a single piece of property, right? And the banks aren't really gonna finance it. That's not how it works anymore. So they're gonna wanna subdivide. And so this property over here, say they've only got the 5 acres. Now they might say, well, we'll give 1 acre to this person, we'll give 4 acres to this person. This property a little bit easier, we'll just split it down the middle, give 6 to each. Now the problem is, this works for an AGC, so this doesn't. So you need 5 acres for any lot in AGC. So what that does is that puts council in the uncomfortable position of telling these people, we either need to say that you can't subdivide this property and you can't sell them as individual homes, or we're going to approve spot zoning. So the example that I picked here with these 2 properties across the street, here's that red 5 acre lot, here's the yellow 12 acre lot. This is all AGC, this entire map here, this is all AGC. So, when they came forward and they say, council, we'd like to subdivide, so we need to rezone. Well, we're either forcing council to do a spot zoning there, or we're telling those folks, sorry, you can't sell. You gotta sell them as 2 lots, 2 homes on a lot. Hopefully you can find a buyer for that. And look at the comp plan here as well. The comp plan says this all needs to stay agriculture. So that doesn't mesh with the comp plan either. So that's really the scenario that that provision in code is meant to contemplate, so that you can have 2 homes, 2 principal homes on an AGC lot. It just needs to be situated such that when it comes time to subdivide, because that will come one day, that you're able to do that by right, and you don't need to ask council for a rezoning.
So it's really a 10 acre minimum,
That's what it needs to say.
a 10 acre minimum, and they need to be careful where they place those houses.
That's right, yeah, and that's what it says, yep. So they need to meet the lot size, so that's the 10 acres, so they would need to have 5 for each, the lot width, and the setbacks for each, so that they're not, you can't put them next to each other.
Will we be adding a level of protection if we included that language in the ordinance of 10 acres?
It already says that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's when it says, so that all applicable lot size.
I'm saying 10 acres.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we're saying applicable lot size, but
Yeah, the
if
applicable
I'm
lot.
sitting at home just reading it.
It would just
10
say, if it just, why don't it just say a minimum of 10 acres? Like-
Yeah, you could clarify that,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what it
So
means.
what's changing? What is it now? And is this what it's supposed to be, or what, I mean, why?
So what it was before is it didn't have, it would end, in the AGC district, up to 2 principal dwellings are allowed on a lot, period.
Oh, yeah, this is definitely necessary.
And just for reference, here's those comparison jurisdictions again. So of the 16, 10 of them don't allow a second principal dwelling on the lot at all.
But if you got the land mass and it's all one lot, I don't see why you couldn't, because you would be able to go back and split it if
Yep.
need be.
Yeah, and that's why our recommendation as staff is just to leave our code the way it is. And we're not recommending that we get rid of the ability to do it. Just leave it that you would need to have those 10 acres so that you can subdivide by right after the fact.
I think we need to be specific to say a minimum of 10 acres, because someone with 5 is gonna come argue, well, I have AGC, I have 5 acres, what do you mean I can't split that? But if it says 10, they know they have 5, they know they can't. That's undoable, that's not doable.
So the jurisdictions that handle it exactly the way we do are Spartanburg County and Gaston County. So they have here any lot of 10 plus acres can have that, multiple dwellings on there. And Spartanburg County, same principles we have on any lot, can have it as long as it can be subdivided and meet dimension requirements.
Yeah, I like the clarity of the 10 acres.
10 acres sets it
Yeah.
apart.
So you're gonna make a motion on that?
Okay. Make a motion?
Is that, are you okay with that, Tommy?
I would prefer everything dealing with ag to be put back the way because of situations of parents and whatnot. And then whenever they go to sell it, they have to deal with selling both houses or whatever. But, and I know what you're saying, Bump, it does make sense. But I would rather, which I'd rather see everything just be the way that it used to be in ag, because
When you say used to be what? What did it used to be?
you could have 2 principal dwellings on 5 acres.
Did it say that before anything got changed, that 2 principal dwellings on 5 acres? Was that permissible?
All it said was, in the AGC district, up to 2 principal dwellings are allowed on a lot, period.
So it never said 5 acres. And even if it was 5 acres, you can't split it and still be AGC, because now you're below 5 acres. So that, what he's saying is not really as
And a lot of
accurate.
rezonings that you've seen come through are because this said what it used to say.
I mean, we had a problem with one last night for the exact
Yes.
same reason.
And actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but at one time, wasn't it 2 homes, and what we considered a mother-in-law?
Yes, and that's still.
You can do
That's still
Okay.
That's still allowed.
Yeah,
And you can do that on 5 acres now.
Yeah, so any
Yeah.
lot can have 1 ADU on it,
But
whether
you-
you've got 2 principal dwellings or 1.
yeah.
That still would be allowable. The mother-in-law suite, that
Yeah.
still be allowable.
But, see, just like a lot of RUD land is in ag use. You get what I'm saying? It's in ag use. Alright, our farm is RUD in ag use. How it ever got changed, I
How
don't
many
know.
acres? How many acres you got?
And right there where the principal is 50.
So you could divide that into, you could have 10 lots there. You could
But-
divide that into 10. Well,
but the
not that
problem-
one subdivision, but-
is, which I don't wanna get off this point, but I don't know if it matters, but we need to have something specifying for family land, because like I think we even talked one time, because we got 7 kids, you'd have to have, do a small subdivision, because it's done been split, the 6 parcels.
Talking about maybe-
But there's a lot of ag land that's like that, and they ain't farming it, but the ag land, and there's families. I just think the whole thing in ag, it's a whole different ballgame.
Minimum lot size is 5 acres, correct?
Yes.
To be
And-
AGC.
And
remain
it,
AGC.
see, that's always been the minimum lot size, so what it originally said then, since it's the minimum lot size, is
Yeah.
that you could have 2 on the minimum lot size,
Yeah.
was the original language. If it was not declarative, but that was the assumption of the
But you could,
language.
you could even go a step further, because the code didn't really address size, it just said are allowed on one
One
lot.
lot.
You could have a non-conforming lot size, you could have a 1 acre lot in AGC, there are some out there.
Yeah.
You could put 2 principal dwellings on it. you know, it'll-
And a lot of that revolved around workers on farms and tenant houses.
But ultimately, you're watering down ag, because when you get ready to sell that property,
You gotta split it.
you gotta split it, and now you've got, out in the middle of agricultural areas, you've got, we've got lots that aren't, you can't divide them and still have 5 acres.
To go back to Jonathan's example, if we put 2 homes on that 5 acres and you had to split it, eventually you're gonna have just what he put
You're
up
gonna have
there,
that
1
1 acre
acre and
parcel.
a 4 acre. So that's kind of setting us up to water, like she said, water down the ag area if 2 principles. Now, you can have a mother-in-law suite, that's probably gonna be smaller, but
That's
2 of
still
them.
watering it
Yeah,
down.
that's still watering it down.
The thing is, if they do it today, you're looking at 20, 30 years down the road. It's probably all gonna be RUD anyway in 20, 30 years. So, but you're taking the original people that have 5 acres and have been planning on doing 2 houses for their daughter or their mother.
You can do that as long as you're not dividing up.
But
You're not gonna have
they
it
wanted
established
it,
property.
they wanted it
Right.
to be, but you're saying that they can't do it on their 5 acre lot.
It's gonna present a problem because down the road, I just had to fix a situation where before zoning and all this stuff come into play before 1984, I think it was. It was one big land mass that had 6, 7 houses on it. All right, you got put up in an estate, time passed, people died off now, grandkids, whoever wants to sell it. No established property lines.
That's been happening for centuries.
So, but now, since we've moved forward, trying to establish something that one could still address and clean up that mess and prevent that mess from happening again. Because what will happen will be another mess if you allow 2 to go on the 5, and when somebody pass away or pass it on, well, we don't really need 2 houses, we need to sell 1, gotta come to the county, gotta split it, now you're down to 1 and 4. If the goal is to protect the ag,
Well,
you can't allow 2 on
So,
5, you can allow 2 on
the-
10.
The other example of what's happening, and we talk about old timers, but we gotta talk about the new timers that go out off of Ranger Road is a great example. And they go out to Ranger Road and they buy 5 acres. And like the guy that came and said, hey, I'm gonna need to break this out because in order for me to keep the chunk of this acreage, I'm gonna have to build another house out here on this corner and sell that piece of property
To help pay for it.
to help pay for it.
Mhm.
And I think we denied that guy. I think we did, I'm not sure, I know I voted no for him, but that is a current trend that will happen, and it won't be people that have farms and people that have had land for many, many years, it'll be people that are showing up,
Trying to make a buck.
buying
Trying to make a
properties
buck.
and trying to carve out corner, and I'm not in favor of
I
that.
wouldn't be supporting that. So I like it, the minimum.
May I say something? May I say something?
Okay, yeah, you may say so.
Either way, as much as I hate to admit it, we're gonna end up RUD. One way or another. That's a given.
Well, I don't know if it's a given because the comp plan that you have says that this needs to stay agriculture, and if the county is serious about protecting its agriculture, you would have applications for rezoning. Anything other than AGC would likely be turned down. I'm thinking you're trying to adhere to the comp plan. So that's exactly what the comp plan is intended to protect when it comes to the agricultural designation, is so you don't feel like everything's gonna be RUD one day. It doesn't have to.
Like, when we changed, me and Allison, we went through and we put basically everything in ag and RUD, you remember?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, whether we do it today or whatever, that, if you come down to that 5 acre lot, somebody's gonna be coming and saying, I wanna get the rezoning for RUD. So, then that spot zoning, or they come that way, or we're sitting there and it's already there for one of their kids. I just know there's a lot of families in that situation.
Well, you either want more land mass in AGC or you don't. If you
More
don't-
land mass.
If you want the bigger lot size and less density, you have to specify the bigger lots, because you know it's gonna eventually be asked to be split. And I would much rather see a split on 10 than come up years
Well, I
later and
wouldn't
split on 5.
disagree. I
So go
would
back to
too.
that, I'm gonna make a motion, but go back to that where I can read, I'll read that.
Which one?
The first, that one. Okay, so I'm gonna make a motion that we add to the ordinance regarding the principal dwellings on a lot in AGC, that we add that, we clarify that on 10 acres, it would require a minimum of 10 acres in order to do that. And
To do 2 dwellings.
to do two dwellings, yeah.
Okay.
To divide a property out that would have 2 dwellings and then whatever else is.
I'll second
Blah, blah,
that.
blah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the next item is regarding lot area measurement.
Okay, so this one has a lot going on in the background, but the provision is actually very straightforward. So we have a section of our code that tells you how to measure things, and lot area is basically a uniform measurement. So it's calculated in square feet by multiplying the lot depth by the lot width, and does not include any portion of a road right of way. Now, this B is what's new to York County, but we've got the list of other jurisdictions on how they handle it. You can see it's near uniform, except for Greenville County, they include it for residential districts. So we hear a lot about best practice, what's the best way to do something. This is best practice on how to measure your lot area. You do not want to include a portion of a right-of-way. And the concept behind that is, once you've got a road, you're not building anything on it. Unless that road gets taken up someday and gets deeded back to the property owner, now it's part of their lot area if that right-of-way goes away. But up until that point, you can't put a shed. Even if your deed says that you own the land under the road, you can't put your shed in the road. You can't base your setback off of the middle of the road, otherwise your houses are going to be right up on the road. These are all best practice principles when it comes to lot area.
But
But that doesn't mean we can't do something to help a lot of the situations that have come up. So our suggestion would be we leave the lot area measurement as it's stated in the code today, but we do have 3 other suggestions that might help some of these issues that pop up that end up in rezonings or variances and things like that. So the first is something we've already taken care of. So we have an interpretation that Rachel put together that shows that any right-of-way that's shown on deeds for parcels created before March 1st of 2022 for the purpose of accessory structure limits are grandfathered in the deeded lot area, because that's how you measured lot area prior to that date. You did include the right-of-way. So folks that, a lot of subdivisions, when they were trying to establish lot sizes, they were going exactly at the minimum. So we're gonna go exactly 1 acre. So the second that you exclude the right-of-way, now you got a lot of, yes, you got a lot of properties that are .95, right?
Yeah.
So that's creating a lot of heartburn for folks that, right now, our accessory structure limits kick in at exactly 1 acre. So it's the second you go under, you have a maximum amount of accessory structures that you can have on the property. Anything larger than that, you can put as many structures on there as you want. So that's the pain point. So we've grandfathered that in with an interpretation. The next 2 things, so that's taken care of, I think, at least one zoning case that was going to go to the board this
Yeah.
month. So that should be helpful. The second thing is administrative adjustments. So that is this packet that says administrative adjustments at the top. So a lot of folks in the community, the most painful interaction you can have with the zoning code is if you're just that close, right? So if you build your home and it turns out, oh shoot, I built it 6 inches too close, it's into the setback. And rather than us saying, I'm sorry, you gotta try
Tear
to
down.
convince the board of a variance, or you gotta move your house back, it happens, believe me.
Yeah.
It would shock you how often it happens.
It wouldn't shock me, or
Um,
Michael Kendrick.
Yeah, so,
We've seen them.
this is something that's intended to help with stuff that is just that close, that we can help justify on an administrative level without having to go to the board for a variance or having to just completely undo the project as it might have been built. So here's that comparison class of jurisdictions. You know, in your county, we already have what you might term to be administrative adjustments for things like parking and buffers. We have the ability to vary that to some degree. There's some flexibility already baked into the code for that. So these are some of the other jurisdictions and how they handle administrative adjustments. Now, some of them don't have any ability to do it. Some of them, like Gaston County, have a laundry list of things in here. There's an approach for Lancaster County, which is basically anything that you can measure. Rock Hill allows most everything as well, and with a great degree of variance there, 10 to 25% is a lot. Same thing for Richland, they cap it at 10%. So that's the concept that we're talking about here. When someone's got an application that they're just that close, and they need a little bit of relief, they can get that from staff on an administrative level rather than having to go to the board. So this is a draft of what that ordinance would look like if that's something that you're interested in us adding to the code. It just adds a little bit of flexibility for those property owners that, and typically it's going to be on smaller scale residential stuff. It's not going to come into play for commercial property that often.
John,
So-
is it mostly, excuse me, is it mostly things that are already built, or is it things that, I mean, like,
It could be both.
it could be better?
Yeah, and it can be structured in any sort of way. So the way I've structured it for this draft is you've got a list of exclusions. It's the third paragraph in there. So those are things that we couldn't vary by this administrative adjustment. So the special districts, they're PDs, you wouldn't want to arbitrarily vary those because that's essentially an agreement between the developer and a council on those specific standards. Certainly, you don't want the height to go up in the airport overlay, if that makes sense, right? Minimum lot size and residential density, those go hand in hand. You don't want administratively approving higher density or smaller lots than are otherwise allowed. And use separation distance, the separation is there for a reason. There isn't really a reason to reduce that at an administrative level. So separating a tattoo parlor from another tattoo parlor, that would be the example of the separation distance. So those would be the things that we would recommend excluding. And the rest of this is based on the approval criteria. We just wouldn't want to hand it out to anyone that's just that shy. They would basically have to demonstrate to the zoning administrator that they tried everything they could, they exhausted everything, or if they built it in error, they did all their surveys, their contractor just made a mistake and they put it in the wrong spot. And it allows the zoning administrator to have apply some conditions to the approval of an adjustment to compensate for that not meeting the standard, if that's appropriate for each application that might come in.
Well, I like the idea of, if you go back a couple slides, that also close. You know, I've said for years now, I wanted you guys to have that flexibility when things do get also close. Because I've gotten, and I'm sure other council members have gotten calls about how rigid they feel like things are. We don't want that to be the stigma of our planning department. And sometimes you get a call that say, make it make sense, why can't we? And that also close will give you guys that flexibility to, yeah, we can do that. We see that, as long as it's not an overly detrimental change, I want you guys to have that flexibility, because I'll just say it, and I hope not too many people listening. Planning department's reputation ain't that great. I just say that fast, hopefully they wouldn't listen, but
They're watching though.
we don't want that to be the perception. We don't feel like that's the case, but, we're not the customer, we're not the client that's coming in trying to get something approved. So I do want you guys to have that baked in flexibility, and whenever we can do it, let's do it, because we're a service. We wanna make sure our,
And you've
Yeah.
identified a conversation that we have all the time. I mean, we're public servants. We'd love to be able to say yes when people come in, but the code is,
Code is
in a lot
code.
of cases, it's the code and it's black and white. And it doesn't give us the leverage, the ability, the authority to grant anything other than what it says in black and white. So when folks are having difficulty and they're upset about they're not able to do what they like to do, their conflict is what the words on the page say, not the planning and zoning staff.
and I like the idea how they had, you showed some had the, I guess the buffer area to 10 to 25, and may not want to be that wide, but, you know, if you're within whatever percent, then we can do it. You may not have gotten it right on, maybe it's 5 to 10, not 10 to 25, but,
Yeah,
you know,
that's,
something that you guys feel comfortable with.
Yeah, in this draft, I have it as anything that's not excluded, and it's a dimensional standard, is 10%. And nothing higher than 10%.
That was what I was gonna
Yeah.
ask, what is the also?
And at the end of the day, if we're not able to justify granting one, they still have the opportunity to go to the board. So it's just an intermediary step that might save some folks from having to go to the.
So I'm gonna go ahead and do number 3, and then I'll cover everything in one shot.
Sure. All right, so a lot of the pain points that folks are having is related to the accessory structure maximum. So this is in 2 sections of the code, and it's mostly the same but slightly different. So the top here, this is county-wide. So there's a height limit on accessory structures of 125% of the height of the principal structure on the lot. For lots that are less than 1 acre, the maximum gross floor area of an accessory structure is 50% of the gross floor area of the principal structure. So that's countywide, and really the principle behind this is when you get smaller and smaller lots, the impact, the visual impact, and the feel and the clutter starts to build more and more as you have less land. Right, so the bulk of the building starts to add up more and more when you add more structures to it. So if you've got a relatively small lot and somebody's got a workshop and a garage and a shed and another shed, then there's really not much left in terms of a lawn or, so the neighbors, we get a lot of complaints about, well, did they get a permit? I don't want to have to look at this. We get that type of code enforcement complaint all the time. Sometimes that person did get a permit, sometimes they didn't. The other section here, this is in the Lake Wiley overlay. So same type of principle here. The language here says an accessory structure must be clearly subordinate to the principal structure in all dimensional aspects. That's suggesting that you can't have an accessory structure that's taller than your principal structure. You can't have one that's wider. You can't have one that takes up more area. And it additionally will say the maximum building coverage of all accessory structures shall not exceed 50% of the building footprint of the principal structure on the lot, or 600 square feet, whichever is greater. So there's a little bit of difference between building footprint and gross floor area there, and there's a little bit of extra permissivity here with the 600 square feet if you don't quite meet that with the footprint in the Lake Wiley overlay. So these aren't really consistent with one another. And we have conflicts with both. And really, we're largely talking about residential accessory structures. And people want to be able to put in their shed or their garage detached. So that's a pain point for a lot of folks. And so there's the same threshold in the Lake Wiley overlay as well on lots less than 1 acre. And it adds the or that are adjacent to Lake Wiley.
So I don't know, I'm not sure where it says, but I'm glad this is on here. This topic I thought was something different, and I think it could still be something different. I'm not gonna ask about that in a minute, but, so this is something that I brought up a few years back, and obviously for the Lake Wiley area, and one of the issues that we have with the way that it's worded for Lake Wiley is that it says that all of those structures have to be in the backyard. So for the Lake Wiley area, the backyard is the lakefront. So it's not just the Lake Wiley area, it's anything that's on Lake Wiley. So it's not, this doesn't necessarily have to be Lake Wiley overlay. This is a property that's on the lake. So Billy Hagner's a great example because he wanted to put in his garage, his big building out there, and he was told that he had to put it in the backyard. Well, he didn't have space. You know, if you built a house and you want to get it as close to the lake as you can get it, you don't have room to put a garage now between the house and the lake, and you don't want to put the garage between the house and the lake. So, but he had all this land on this other side, but it wasn't applicable for that side of the property. So I think we need to address that somewhere where we're talking about these accessory structures.
Yeah, there are a couple of features of the accessory structure limitation in the Lake Wiley overlay that are unique to Lake Wiley. There's also some design criteria that's not countywide. I left that out of this discussion because I think we're trying to focus for this discussion purposes on what's triggering things with lot area and really the size and proportion of the basic concepts there. And I think Lake Wiley probably wants to keep the extra criteria that maybe isn't suitable countywide, but I think at least trying to combine these two on basic things like how we measure. Do we measure by gross floor area? Do we measure by building coverage? I think we have an opportunity to bring those together.
So can you add that other part into, can you
Sure, we
fix
can.
that too?
Yeah, this is all a discussion, whatever ultimate ordinance you request.
Just because it's gonna continue to come up, and he had to come before the zoning board of appeals, and Michael Kendry and I can certainly tell you that when I was on the zoning board of appeals, we had a lot of people who would come, and they paid maybe $700 at the time or something. And I remember that the one that was in River Hills. Remember that really old couple that was from River Hills? And their garage, the house had been there forever, but their garage was a few inches over, like, it just was, I mean, and the board, we went on, and I mean, finally, I'm like, can we let these people go home and have some peace, because we're not gonna make them take down their garage and that's where the flexibility for y'all would be good, because those people would never have had to come, and it wasn't even a problem for anybody. I don't know how they ended up there, but there were a lot of things like that where, people had come and had there just been a little bit of common sense flexibility along the way, those nights wouldn't have lasted till, longer than what used to be a normal council meeting. So, but I do think we need to fix, the placement of those buildings. They got to be really big warehouses, so we've addressed that. But, whether or not the front of the backyard, they should be, on whatever side is not the lake side. However that's.
Yeah, and maybe as part of this, it might be appropriate to ask for us to craft an ordinance that addresses accessory structures comprehensively, to include Lake Wiley, where in the yard they can be located, setbacks, and all of what we're talking about here related to lot size,
Right,
based
I agree
on
with that.
acreage and location. So this is kind of a suggestion of where we might be able to go to kind of bring these two separate provisions that are very similar and kind of unify them. So we suggest, and to loosen it up a little bit, because I think a lot of folks are running into the conflict with the 50% size. So our suggestion would be lots less than 1 acre in size. The maximum total building coverage of accessory structures is 65% of the building footprint of the principal structure, or 600 square feet, whichever is greater. So that's meshing those two provisions together. On lots 1 acre or larger in size, there is no maximum building coverage for accessory structures. So that's consistent across both of those, so that is unchanged here. Residential accessory structures shall be clearly subordinate to the principal structure in all dimensional aspects. So that's bringing this piece of the Lake Wiley provision countywide, but limiting it to residential. As you really don't want your residential accessory structures looming over your principal dwelling. For a commercial setting, you might have an accessory structure, then it makes sense for that to be a little bit higher, so that's why left this as non-residential accessory structures are limited to under 25% of the height of the principal. So that's consistent with.
Is there a number of these that someone can put on a property?
I'm sorry.
Is there a number that someone can put can have.
A number of buildings.
Mhm.
Some jurisdictions do it that way, so here's that comparison chart. You're gonna see there are a million ways to skin a cat when it comes to accessory structures. All of these look drastically different. So some of them just say, well, Anderson County, you can cover up to 20% of your rear yard in accessory structures. That's all it says. So nothing about height, nothing about area, just 20% of your rear yard. There's maximum building coverage. You can do it that way of the entire lot. So Charleston County, they don't care how much of the lot is your principal or how much of it is your accessory. They just care, don't cover more than 30 to 40% of your lot with buildings. There's a lot of rear yard stuff in here. There are some jurisdictions that say how many buildings you can have. So here's an example. In Clover, they allow you to have no more than 2 accessory buildings. Rock Hill has an interesting approach where it's based on if you have a garage or not, how big that garage is dictates how much more accessory structure. I think that's meant to ensure that everyone at least has a garage. And if you want to do more than that, there's a limitation. They have a new rural district. I'm not sure if they have any properties that are in that rural district for the city. But if you have more than 5 acres, there's no maximum in that district. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this. So it's just what works best for your jurisdiction. There's no right answer for accessory structure limitation.
If we had a stormwater utility, would that, a stormwater utility ordinance, they would pay more if they had those rooftops, wouldn't they?
It would depend on how it's structured, but yeah, in theory. The impervious surface is often linked to that fee.
Let me say what I thought we were going to be talking about. I thought we were talking about if somebody had 20 acres and they wanted to divide that into 4 or 5 acre lots, but the road took up a portion of that, so they technically could have 3 lots.
Right.
And so what was the road portion was eliminated from the calculation that.
Yep. So that's part of it. So that's so what we've already grandfathered is for the accessory structures, because that's where some of this is coming from. We have had at least the one example in a recent rezoning where a gentleman bought 15 acres and thought he could subdivide it into 3, not realizing that some of that acres is wrapped up in the right of way. So our interpretation right now is limited to just the accessory structures, because really, if you allow folks to start taking credit for the right-of-way when they are creating new lots, you're artificially inflating that density, and you're artificially allowing more lots. Now, maybe that might not matter when all the lots are 5 acres, but when you get down to smaller lot sizes, so say 6,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet, and you've got someone that's got a large property that has a lot of right-of-way, now you're artificially inflating the permitted density of that development. They're getting more lots out of it than they otherwise would. We see that very commonly with townhomes. They were claiming credit for right-of-way and getting a lot more units out of it that way. So really, we recommend that you keep the lot area measurement how it reads today, just for the fact that if you start allowing, if we change this, that's going to affect how we measure everything in the code. There's a lot of trickle effect, and it's going to allow artificial density. And really, this is pretty uniform how jurisdictions measure lot area.
Well, we did approve that 15 acre split, right?
It was rezoned, yep.
Yeah,
So we can always do that.
That's right.
because I would have hate to have told that. I remember the one, did Christie have one in her
It
district?
stayed in AGC.
Yeah.
They put a deed restriction and made
Yeah.
it stay in AGC.
They put deed restrictions on it, but you can't put deed restrictions on it if it stayed in AGC. It went to RUD, but they were deed restricted to stay at 5 acres or close to 5 acres for the other one. So it was rezoned to RUD, but it stayed at five-ish acres.
Gotcha. So what do we need to do with this part here? We need to,
You want to take those two and lump it to this one? Is that what you're?
For clarity, this is what I would recommend that you take it up and vote it on individual pieces. So you would take one vote on whether or not to change the lot area measurement. You would take one on whether or not to add administrative adjustments. And it sounded like it might be best to ask for an ordinance on accessory structures and to take a look at that comprehensively.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a motion that we, that regarding lot area measurement, that we, accept the recommendations of planning department and that we, break it out into the different categories. And that we continue to look at that we also look at, a comprehensive, wait, what, was that the word you used? Something for the accessory structure.
Yeah, comprehensive ordinance
Comprehensive ordinance
related
related
to
to the
accessory structures.
Yeah, accessory structure maximums.
whatever she said, I second. Because I don't know what she said.
I don't know what I said, I couldn't
All in
repeat it.
favor?
Just say, accepting staff's recommendations
Yeah.
for lot size, lot measurement.
Mhm.
Some flexibility and,
Administrative adjustments.
yeah,
Measurements.
And what are we doing with the accessory structure part?
combining the two, we're really kind of combining the benefits of each one into one.
And really,
We have two separate ordinances coming forward, or we
Yes.
all gonna roll into one? Yeah, we want them separate.
two separate ordinances. One related to administrative adjustments, and one looking at accessory structures both in the Lake Wiley overlay and countywide. And try to take a look at fixes to both.
All right, I'll second it.
You know, there's some pushback on Lake Wiley overlay, but I think it's also, it's not just Lake Wiley overlay, because you've got properties along Mount Gallant, and you've got a lot of lake properties, so it might not be that it's the Lake Wiley overlay, it might just be lake frontage or lake, maybe, something.
Okay, all in favor? Okay. So the next item is regarding home occupation flexibility.
So,
Where'd that come up? When did that come up?
yes, that was referred by Christie. And so, as she referred it to the committee, she was looking for some flexibility to be added to home occupations. So what I'll do is I'll go over for you what home occupations are, what the code looks at, and then I've given you the whole section of the code related to home occupations. So that's your second handout here. And really, we're looking for direction from the committee as to what type of flexibility you would like us to add to the code. After you take a look and see what we have on the books today, that might be helpful to inform what flexibility you might add. So here's the applicability section of home occupation. So it's business activity, occupations, professions that is conducted, and here's some of the key words: incidental and subordinate to the use of a dwelling unit for dwelling purposes. So it's really, it's not the primary function of the site. So if you drive up to the site, like, hey, it looks like there's a business going here, you're off to a bad start. So a home occupation is carried on by a resident of the dwelling unit. So they live on site, they live in that dwelling, and does not change the residential character of the dwelling unit. So that's why I say when you drive up and if it looks like a business, you're already on the wrong foot, because they're meant to look like a dwelling, and but for the fact that you knew by web advertising or something, you wouldn't know that there's a business there. That's
There's
the
no sign
intent.
out front.
Right. So here's a couple of things that are exempt from permitting, as long as you don't have any on-site sales or client visits. So it's really meant to keep people from coming to the site and it being like a site of commerce with a lot of coming and going and exchange of goods. So if you're doing arts and crafts, you've got a home office, you're making food at home and you're bringing it somewhere else to sell it, you've got a daycare that's got less than 6 kids, those are all exempt from home occupation permitting. So we have 2 different types of home occupations. We have large lot and small lot. So if you turn to the second page, you can see some examples of what is allowed on a large lot versus what's allowed on a small lot. And so that threshold is a large lot needs to have at least 2 acres. So if you wanted to do something like animal boarding, animal breeding, animal grooming, you would need to have at least 2 acres to do that for a home occupation. If you have less than that, you need to find a commercial site to do that, or find another property that's larger. So the home occupation section covers, you've got it all in front of you, but there is a permit that's required. So that's basically just a check that you would submit an application. We look at it, make sure that it meets these criteria, and say you're good, and then you would just renew that annually. Because as we all know, once you establish a business, if it's going well, you're going to start expanding. It's going to look different and different every year, potentially. And that's happened in the past. So once you hit a certain level of expansion where you've got outside storage and you've got customers showing up, now we're not really a home occupation, now we're a commercial business.
Is there-
Mortuary, you can have a mortuary?
So, is there a fee for them to come in and,
There is, I think it's like
50.
Is what,
$50.
so,
for a permit? They get a permit for it?
Yep.
And what if they don't have a permit? Can they not operate if they don't have a permit?
Correct.
so just make, when you say it, come in to register or just notify staff of what they're doing, first thing that popped in my mind is like, we don't have a business license fee for regular operating businesses. Why would we want to impose that on somebody working out of their home? So I think this is a great segue and part of the should add to the conversation of talking about registering a business or business license, whatever that conversation is going to look like coming forward that we mentioned partly in our strategic planning meeting, something along those lines, because I don't think it would be right, fair, or just for little Susie who's doing the sewing at the house, pay $50 a year, and you have this business over here, full-blown operational advertising, paying nothing
Yeah.
to operate.
Yeah, they are very similar in concept. The reason why you would certainly want to permit home occupations, even aside from the business license discussion, is the assumption is there's no business there and that it's just a home, it's a residence. And by virtue of them coming in and saying, well, we'd like to do a home occupation, that allows us to say, okay, yeah, you fall within the parameters, you're good. Otherwise, they're just assuming that they're good to go and no one's able to tell them, yeah, that's a home occupation and you're good, or that's definitely not a home occupation and you're under violation.
The one thing I haven't heard you mention, or I haven't seen it on here, filling up income taxes, like a tax business, where would that fall?
They would have to report that.
Professional offices.
I was just out for.
I'm just
Tax
gonna,
file.
I'm gonna tell you, number 1 on here, animal grooming, boarding, training, and breeding, absolutely there is more impact from that on neighbors than all this other stuff put together. It is a nightmare for some people, and I think we need to boost up something that protects those folks. First of all, when they have, if they're boarding animals, there is barking going on, and that is an impact on someone's. There are smells. There is a ton of traffic coming and going, and it is a very high dollar business. And so I've given you an example of one of those. So I absolutely. I mean, I know if they have to have 2 acres, and maybe they don't have 2 acres or something, but some do, and I've got constituents that have contacted me that it's a really bad thing.
Yeah, and anything as with anything else in the code, this table can be modified. So if there are things that council feels like maybe shouldn't be allowed as a home occupation, you can can certainly have it removed from the list, or if you think there are things that I'm missing that.
Is this
that are
current or is
specific.
this
This is current,
proposed?
yep.
Okay, this is current.
Now, if you're saying large lots start at 2 acres, 2 acres or better, that's not like what would be in my neighborhood where we have a 1/4 acre. So at some point, where would you allow breeding or animal grooming? Because you just can't take it off the books without allowing it somewhere. Otherwise, now we're kind of forcing people's hands to do it totally in the backwoods or whatever they're gonna do. 'Cause let's face it, just because you make a rule, don't mean people are not gonna do it.
It's the boarding and the breeding that is, I will take you and show you an example when you.
Yeah, and this is,
Okay, dropping on all
Yeah.
ages.
there are scores of these home occupation businesses out there. Majority of people do not apply. We know they're out there.
Right.
And it's similar to a lot of provisions in the code where it's on the books because at some point, someone goes too far, it becomes a problem. And so most of the time we find out about home occupation or an attempted home occupation or an intended one because someone's gone too far with it, and code enforcement gets a call, we go out there, like, whoa, that does not qualify for a home occupation. Or sometimes we go out there and say, yeah, that does qualify, all you need to do is apply and you're good. And your neighbor won't be able to complain about you anymore. So it cuts both ways.
There's just boarding in the, I'm sorry.
You first.
The boarding and the breeding would be classified on a private residence as a private kennel. And that's what I was trying to bring up. There are specific standards for a private kennel and only allowed in certain districts. It's a little bit different than home occupation stuff. It is, but we classified that different. So that's what I was looking at right now. Just-
And you can do any of the things on the table on a commercial lot in the correct zoning district. This is just saying, if you want to do it at your home,
At home.
this is the size of the lot you need to have. And then the table on the next page are performance standards. So those are meant to ensure that it looks and functions like a home still.
Then speaking of the business license, I think where that's gonna come up is in the Economic Development Committee. So I think there's those small business focused initiatives in the strategic plan that the Economic Development Committee is gonna be asked to weigh in on. Part of the challenge is we don't know all the small businesses because we don't have a business license. And so if we want to better understand the ecosystem, the total inventory, that would be how you do it. The question is, do y'all want to do that? Is that worth it? And how would that then tie with this? I do think that they work hand in hand. If you have both, you don't necessarily have to have both.
So,
Okay.
gosh, there's, even when you pull up some, if you're looking at your, I'll still call it MapQuest, but when you're looking at your maps and stuff, it'll show you a neighborhood, and, if you put in somebody's road and you're going to visit somebody or something, it shows you, it's got the little icons of all the business things and stuff on it. There's a lot of them. We just don't wanna, I still don't understand mortuaries on here, that is,
Because a lot of those are taken, they take place in a home. So the mortuary family would live in the home, and they'd have their kitchen on the first floor, they'd have their apartments on the first floor, and the bottom level is their mortuary.
I got one.
That's your typically smaller establishments.
Okay, so on the animal part, I would look at the animal grooming, much like where you've got the barbershop and beauty
Mhm.
salon that serves only one customer at a time. I think that is a pull out away from the breeding and whatever else.
Boarding.
The boarding, yeah. And then the other thing is, where you got the dance and gymnastic, if you could,
that's not allowed. That
Oh,
one's
yeah,
got
the
dead.
X is not permitted.
right. So if someone, and this happened during COVID, I actually know 3 different people that this happened to. They worked for the Y or various sundry workout places, and they converted their garage into just workout, not gymnastics. It was one customer at a time, much like the hair salon, the beauty salon. So, I don't know if we wanna add a little, I don't know how y'all feel about that, but, I mean, that was a have to thing. You know, they had no way of making a living.
You know, most people don't want their neighbors to have people coming and going. That's the problem here, so, I mean, I don't care if somebody had a gymnastics studio in their garage and they lived beside me and they had 8 people coming in a day, they had 8 one hour slots, I wouldn't want that to be beside me. You know,
Well, I saw over here you've got like some limitations or something. Is that,
Yeah, so the table that starts on page 264, those are the performance standards.
like you could have, minimum or maximum? See, it says the home occupation receives not more than 6 clients visits per day. I don't know how you regulate that.
You don't?
That would
I
be
couldn't
hard.
enforce it.
I
You would
couldn't enforce it.
not be able to regulate that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we're not gonna have zoning staff standing on site for these things, so they're all self-enforced. They would, they have to, they're performance standards, so they have to abide by them. So the only way that we know that they're not is if the neighbor complains.
and that's what this is really set up for. This is set up to help the folks that have an issue with something in these categories.
So you need any kind of,
So what,
But Jonathan, what about the ones that require a state license in addition to something? So, you know, I know there's a lady that does nails and she's not certified by the state. Well, she does hair and nails. She's not certified by the state. So what happens if somebody, there's a constant flow of people coming to her home and is the county ever, in other words, if they're okay here, do we ever look at, are you also licensed by? So
No, they would.
That's a
they would be-
separate.
Yeah, they'd be violating DES's
Okay.
regulations.
Okay. Is it a good idea to include in our ordinance that, that it's, I don't know how I don't know how to word it, but something that says that, you know, it is recommended that they also have their, like, we're not enforcing it, but we're just saying that this doesn't, you know, allow something that the state doesn't allow, is what I'm trying to say, that is still a requirement. Those state requirements are, because there are a lot of things on here that have state requirements. I'm just wondering if you just mentioned
Yeah,
it.
you could do that. I don't know if the juice would be worth the squeeze to do a text amendment just for that. But we would call those a reminder or a tickler provision that says, hey, by the way, do this. But there's no actual teeth to the provision. It's just kind of a
So
reminder.
you have people now that are selling food. There's a lady who, she puts her food out on a little stand and it gets hot all the time. And I often think, you know, you better get there to those eggs before it's, before it's 100 degrees. So I don't know if is that allowed? Can they sell
like eggs?
food? Can they put out, you know, all the little food stands and things? Is that
Food
not
stands is different. That's a temporary use.
temporary use, even if it's a permanent display?
You could do a permanent one also, but that's all.
Cooking eggs sitting outside?
They're just putting eggs, like from their chickens, they put their eggs or soups and different stuff out for people to stop and get. It's kind of like a farm stand, but there's a lot more of them than there ever have been, I think, like little individual ones.
Yeah, those are allowed, but it's a different section.
Just to add to what you were talking about earlier, a lot of times the state organizations or federal will require approval from the local jurisdiction. So a lot of the folks that come into our office are, hey, I need something from y'all saying this is okay for me to do in my house because the accountant board of South Carolina is requesting it or something
Okay.
like that. So we get a lot of that.
So there's a little bit of,
It's a chicken and egg.
it's not all this and
Extended
that.
metaphor.
Yeah.
Go back to the eggs.
so
Go back to this.
what of this is, because this is massive, I mean, it just goes on and on.
Yeah.
This is what we have in place now?
It is.
Okay.
Okay, so what is it that Christie particularly, she was having an issue with, maybe someone in her community that she wanted us to take a look at this?
Yeah, I don't know specifically. I know we've had some code enforcement cases that, she had verbalized that she thought maybe that would have been more appropriate as, or should be allowed as a home occupation. I think that those particular cases had to deal with a lot of outdoor storage of equipment. So there's limitations on storage that are in the code, so maybe that's the flexibility. I don't want to speak for her. I don't know exactly what she was looking for additional flexibility, but that
So
might
you're
be something
looking
in that direction.
for us to do the what additional flexibility
That's
is
right.
requested? So this
we
is
don't have
current. This is current.
This
All
is
of
current,
this.
yes.
This is what we have.
Okay.
So again, I would say, have a talk with Kristen, is anything specific, we kind of address it, because right now, we wouldn't know what her issue or her rub was.
I know what a couple of them, but we'll let her tell them.
Well, and I think it's not expected that y'all deal with all these in one meeting, right? So there's work to be done. I think it's fine to do more research, ask staff to do more research and bring stuff back, so I think that's a good call.
Well, I think right off the bat, Allison, you have the concern with the boarding and breeding, right?
Yeah, but I'm gonna take care of one of those because it's only an acre lot.
The what?
It's only an acre lot. I'm gonna take care of one of those.
Oh, okay, okay.
But I just think in general, I do think that's I just think that's a big one. I think one of the things Christie was talking about is the storage of goods and materials outside. It was basically a mulch yard it was storage of mulch on
That
somebody's property.
and Charlie's case that we had, remember Carolina Lighting?
No, I don't remember that.
When he was bringing his equipment, I was telling Buck, when he was bringing his equipment, and parking it in his yard, because he has to leave out at all time of days.
Who was that?
Remember Carolina Lighting does all of South Carolina's light and traffic signals.
Oh, okay, I don't know about that one.
Well, we'll probably have to follow up with her to see if we need to address anything,
Yeah.
because
So we're
what we
gonna
have right
table,
now, yeah, what we have right now is fine unless we hear something drastic from her that needs to be addressed.
What other information can staff bring to y'all for the next meeting? Is there, I know y'all did best practices and looked at other jurisdictions. Jonathan, is there anything that you can bring back next meeting to show whatever you're doing?
Yeah, as you can see, this gets pretty exhaustive, so it probably won't be as tidy as some of the other tables were, but if you'd like some examples of how other jurisdictions do it in that comparison.
I wouldn't mind seeing some examples,
Mhm.
so.
I would like to hear if we're having any kind of issues that we're seeing over and over that
Yeah,
needs the
Yeah,
attention.
like if
So
y'all
I-
had one or a couple of different types of
I think
requests.
Rachel's got some examples for you of things. Do you have ones that we've approved?
Yeah, so I printed out, so we don't have too many that we have denied. I think out of all of the ones that we have looked at maybe in the last year or so, I think maybe we had only denied 4. And that's because we talk to people up front before we sort of lead them down that path. So most people don't pay unless they're getting approved for the most part. So for the, so 3 of these that were turned down, I can pass these out for y'all to look at, but that's what this is what the application looks like. And they have to sign off on the performance standards, initialing that they're gonna abide by all of those. And so like this one, this is for us, a small lot. And the rub with this one, so this one came in as a code enforcement issue. And the rub with this one is that he was doing some boat repair and storage and stuff outside. And so that was why we ended up having to deny this one and turn it down. So that's, I don't know if you want one of those too, but, so that's what that one is.
I can see that. No problem.
It's supposed to go.
Okay.
And then,
Small lot.
Rachel, what size, this was a small lot?
yes, ma'am.
So he's got some acres.
Yeah, for Richard over on Bowater is the applicant's name. So that's why he was told no. Another one where we ended up having to tell someone no is because there were some CC&Rs, some covenants, conditions and restrictions that said no. Typically, we don't look at those unless it has to do with a use. So in this particular case, the CC&Rs were very clear that, it says it needs to be single-family residential and no businesses.
And those are very common, to
Yes.
exclude businesses and CCNs.
Yes. Yeah. And both of these came through as a code enforcement case with neighbors complaining about a business.
Do some of the HOAs have CCRs like that? Is that something that you'd see in general in a
Yeah,
neighborhood?
we-
that's-
I would be surprised with new residential development, I'd be surprised to see one that doesn't restrict businesses in some form.
That one that, the one that I told you about,
Which one was that?
the truck and the driveway with the sign on it,
Oh, yeah.
is that being worked out?
They have turned off the sign. As far as I know, they have not turned it back on. So until they do, they're not in violation. But they have been advised that if they have the sign on it, it's a violation.
Speaking of HOAs and covenants, codes, and restrictions on it, I know this is definitely off topic, but do HOAs report anything in York County to us? Like, hey, we're in existence, we run an HOA over in...
No, the only time we hear from an HOA is if they want us to step into their shoes and enforce their restrictions on their residents, which we cannot do.
I was gonna say we shouldn't.
Yes.
No, we don't. State law is pretty clear about that. And the only reason that we did it for this one, or this one in particular, was for a pressure washing business, is because the language in state law says that we can say no, or we can enforce it if we're issuing a permit that allows a use, which a home occupation would allow a use.
Yeah, in other words, the county can't approve anything that would allow a use that their CC&Rs don't allow.
And our permit has a check box for them to disclose.
It does.
Yes. And some folks will deliberately leave that blank and say, nah, and rely on, and hope nobody in their neighborhood calls them out on it. Sometimes they truly just don't know that. We've seen both.
So maybe you want to look at some other examples of other counties.
I mean, I only want to address something we're having an issue with, that staff is seeing any kind of
Yeah.
overloading
I think-
issue.
I
We
think
keep
you
seeing
should-
this, we keep seeing this, we keep seeing this, then let's address it. I don't feel comfortable just looking over and saying, hey, let's just change this, and when we haven't had a problem out of this.
Debbie, I would say, why don't you reach out to Christie and ask her what she had in mind, because we haven't really talked about this. We did talk about this way back when the comp plan from, like, in 2017 came before us. She had a list of things during that comp plan discussion, but I haven't heard anything since. It might just be, maybe, it was an opportune time for her to bring this up again, and, but I would ask her, what are those things? And then because I didn't know this was, like, coming before us. I didn't know we were working on this.
Okay.
But I do see that I do see a couple things that could be amended.
Fixed up. Okay. So, but right now, we're just going to table.
Yeah, we can discuss it again at the next meeting.
Yeah, kind of have more discussion at the next meeting.
Okay, all right. So the final thing is discussion regarding other planning items that staff would like to be referred to the Planning and Zoning Committee.
So we do have two draft ordinances in our pockets that address very common issues that we think need to be addressed in code. So we would just ask that you refer them at the next council meeting, refer them to this committee so that we can discuss them in greater detail. One being the major minor subdivision distinction. Right now in our code, there's language for the minor subdivisions that says that you can't divide a minor subdivision lot into another minor subdivision, but it doesn't give any sort of time frame about how far back we're supposed to look to make that determination. So that's all about trying to exclude piano key lots coming up on existing county roads. And so we think we need to clarify for the development community, because they ask us all the time, well, how far back does that go? We've been implementing it at 20 years, but looking at some of the other jurisdictions, we have a different suggestion to codify that, to clarify that for the development community.
I think that clarification is critical for their staff.
Yeah, okay.
And one of the things we're trying to do with these new items, at this point, we really don't want to have staff-generated items being seen for the first time by the committee. We really want y'all to engage with the council and for those referrals coming from the full council. So if y'all want to discuss these items, we want y'all to kind of ask for that and have that shared. So want to make sure that that's out in the open with the full council, and that what y'all are working on, everybody knows, and that you think it's a priority to look at.
And the second item would be related to egress movements in our TIAs. Right now, you need to have a certain level of service for all movements associated with the development, but the movement that has the most difficulty passing the level of service requirement is leaving a site. And that's typically because those left movements have difficulty getting onto existing streets. So they typically will have to do right in, right out only, or they fail altogether and they can't do the project. So we're analyzing whether or not it would be appropriate to lower the level of service just for egress movements. So not talking about intersections, leaving those as they are, but allowing maybe a lower tiered level of service just for egress movements. I get that right?
The level of service required by a TIA?
So it depends on whether it's on a major road or a minor road. For minor roads, it's C, and for major roads, it's D.
So here's my question, if this is an example of this, once the Harris Teeter is built and connected to Summer House, when the people from Summer House get ready to come out of their neighborhood, they will not be able to take a left. Based on the traffic study, I don't think they'll be able to take a left to go to the light at 5 Points.
We're not sure about that. Jonathan and I did talk about that at one point after you brought that up earlier.
Yeah.
I think we'd have to look at.
Is that the type of thing? Is that kind of what we're talking like?
No, so it would be, so if since you brought up the Harris Teeter example, so if the folks leaving the Harris Teeter site onto their street, which they are egressing onto, whether it's the extension that's going in or it's onto 55, that's the movement that we're talking about.
Okay.
Egressing a development onto a road.
That's the same spot.
Until it's going to a major road.
No, I think you're thinking further down, and we're not sure if there's going to be meetings there or not. And we're happy to look into that, but he's talking about closer to Harris
We're
Teeter.
talking about the egress from Harris Teeter, not from
Not from the neighborhood.
where everybody's gonna cut through to come out on
That's
55. That's okay. Kind of the same difference. I was close. I mean, let me just say, I can see where this could be an issue, but not just for that commercial. But
So maybe the better examples would be the Tractor Supply.
yeah,
So they've only got the one egress movement, so that's what we're talking about. So, as you know, it's a challenge coming out of there. Sometimes taking that left. So, some projects they might not even be able to move forward because I think we're getting feedback from the traffic engineers that it's an accepted industry standard that egress movements are difficult, and maybe we're being too harsh on that. That's the feedback that we're getting.
they approved that the state approved that for that egress from Tractor Supply right there.
Eventually.
Well, they don't look at the egress from the state perspective. They look at just traveling along the main thoroughfare. All they
Just
want
the
is
TIA.
to move cars. Yeah, they don't look at the egress part. That's what he was saying. John was saying that it's not looked at in other groups like we do with that egress kind of thing.
And speaking of TIAs, I made a little note on here. I know it's been about, what, almost a year now since we dropped that tier 1. How's that been working for staff?
Okay.
It's been working great. So yeah, that has definitely reduced the number of TAs required for smaller developments. And so yeah, it's been working fine. Nothing's been missed by doing that either, so we're not missing anything by having that reduction.
Cool.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam Chair, may I ask, make a comment on a prior item very briefly?
Okay.
Thank you. On your administrative adjustments, Jonathan, I was looking at your exclusions. I was just thinking overlays in general are standards that are either stricter or less than what the base code provides, and perhaps another exclusion would be just limitations in overlays in general, as those are ordinances passed by council that they think are important to restrict or to enhance the base language. Just as you're addressing that, maybe consider that item.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so these items, we will be bringing back to council.
So you'll be asking to refer these items if you want to talk about them at the next meeting.
Yes.
You know, you bring them up, like Tommy brought them up last night, right, at the next council.
I'll make the motion to refer to your committee. I'll put it down, I'll get with them and get.
Always have to help with life.
I'm sure Jonathan will send out a friendly reminder to bring it up.
As long as it's friendly, John.
Oh,
Don't forget to,
I won't forget.
I think the opportunity too is to get into a regular pattern of when y'all want to have these meetings.
That would be
as
great.
well. So then we can get that.
Because I got a short time frame.
we're gonna meet every 6 months.
I got a real short time frame.
Okay, so, we have in the past said, to do it monthly. What do y'all think? No?
We got that much going on we need to change to address?
Well, I'm just throwing it out. I'm throwing a bone, just.
Well, I think we need to come back with this. I would come back with this, some of this maybe in a month after we.
But to say we're gonna meet every month.
I wouldn't set it for
No.
a monthly
Okay.
meeting, no.
No.
I would say from now till next month, I would plan something for, 3 or 4 weeks out after the next council meeting. And then go from there. I mean, because we've gone a long time without meeting, and it makes for a longer meeting, but, you get a lot done while you're in that mindset.
Okay, so we'll look at that, because we do have these issues that we need to address. Okay, so the next council meeting is the 3rd, and so, more towards the end of September.
You don't have to set it
You
right
can
now.
set the date now.
Okay.
We
I am
working
gonna
on
be
the
gone
fly.
in October.
What?
I'm gonna be gone. I may not come back, but.
Please come back.
So we would want to do it before I leave in the 1st of October. Okay. All right, so, I'm sure everyone has had a chance to read the minutes.
Yep, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the November 6th, 2023 Planning and Zoning Committee.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And, do we have any items for executive session?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay, and.
So I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion to adjourn.
Okay, and
All in favor?
I agree.